This Scale Model Basics sponsored by Hobby Zone USA, your source for hobby storage solutions, hard to find modeling tools, and aftermarket modeling needs. Welcome to Scale Model Basics. I'm Tim Kidwell. Let's talk about scribing realistic wood grain into plastic. You're going to be like, Tim, nothing looks more like wood than wood, so why would you bother? And I'm going to say this. One, you don't have to worry about multimedia. You don't have to worry about trying to attach wood to plastic or wood to metal or whatever. If you make it all out of styrene, you can just come in and use plastic cement. So that would be my recommendation for the reason why to do this particular operation. So how do we do it? Well, first of all, you're going to need a couple of scratch brushes. What I have here is a brass and a steel scratch brush. The steel one is going to be stiffer. The brass one is going to be more forgiving. They're going to give different kinds of wood grains. You're also going to want a pencil with a fine tip, and then a couple of different scribers. At this point, I have measured and marked out a 4-foot by 6-foot, let's call it a gate, and I've marked 6-inch planks along its width and then drawn those planks in. What you're going to want to do on a situation like this is bring in a heavy ruler, line this up, and then delineate those planks. Doesn't take much, just a couple of passes with the scriber to do that. All right, now each of those planks have been delineated, and that's great. That's good stuff there. Next, this is where a reference comes in really handy. Find yourself a photo or a few photos of the kind of effect, wood grain effect, that you're looking to reproduce on your model. In this case, I'm going to be reproducing a really weathered sort of look with the wood. So, with your reference at hand, come in and start sketching in those major details, those things that really pop out at you when you're looking at your reference. The darker lines in the wood grain, maybe deeper gouges, knot holes, those sorts of things, and just sort of sketch those in on each of your planks. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what you're doing is giving yourself sort of a roadmap on what you want to achieve. You do not need to be an artist to do this. And there is no one who is judging you except you. And if they are, who cares? Once you've sort of sketched out your roadmap, the next step is to come in with a scriber like this, or a sharp needle or something along those lines. And then come back to where you've sketched and just start to scribe in some of those details, especially like maybe you've got a knot that you wanted to have in there. Use varying pressure when you're doing these scribings, because you don't want them all to be the same. And you don't necessarily need to hit all of the ones that you've put on here either. Consider also where there's going to be more wear. For instance, down along here, especially if, let's say, my gate, so it opens to the left, well, probably the people who are using it, maybe, they kick these first couple of planks to open the gate. So just think about those sorts of details, like, well, down here, this is going to be eaten away a little bit more. So you can go through your wood and just have fun with scribing some of these major details. Arduous, and it doesn't have to take you forever. After you've finished scribing your major details, your major grain, your prominent grain looks, right? The next thing is to come in with your wire brushes. Now, as I had said earlier, the steel brush is going to be stiffer. So it's going to give you a different kind of grain than what the brass brush is. And my recommendation is use both of those, okay? So I've already done this first one. So I'm just going to come in this steel brush and just drag it along. And you can move back and forth a little bit. You can even twist the brush. You can pick it up and start over. You're going to find that is going to gouge your planks quite nicely to give you, and you can run your thumb across there, to give you fine grain. And then I'm going to switch over to this brass one. Now, like I said, this one is going to be less aggressive than the steel brush was. Lastly, once you're happy with where you're at with your wood grain, all that's really left to do is go paint. I'm going to go ahead and cut my gate out of this plastic. After I get it out, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit it very lightly with some 600 grit sandpaper, actually a 600 grit sanding sponge, just to knock down the surface a bit. I think that's already starting to look like a gate. So we're going to put some paint on this and then do the final weathering to bring out all that texture. At this point, I've got my base wood colors down, right? And got some fading and stuff like that. And I'm already liking how this looks, but the last thing I'm going to do is mix some gray and black wash together, thin it down so that I've got kind of a dark gray here, a little bit of black. And then I'm just going to put that wash all across the surface. It's got, you know, it darkens those real deep ones that you scribe with that. But it also picks up, and it might be a little bit tough to tell, but it does definitely pick up the texture that you create with the wire brushes. Now you can do this with weathered wood, new wood, and then if you want, I used all acrylics on this, but you can definitely come in and use artist oils to highlight that wood grain even further. And if you wanted to, like, I've got a really cool knot here. Some of these things that, you know, develop almost out of happenstance, come back in with a fine brush and you can really pick those details out, and then it's ready to put on your model. And that is how you scribe realistic wood grain on styrene. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.